Well, welcome everybody to today's session of Spiral Dynamics Integral Live. I'm Paul Kirst, and today we're going to do a discussion on the issue of metamodernism. I prepared a little pretty short presentation to kind of give an overview. Before I get into it, I guess I want to have a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm no expert on the subject of metamodernism. And as I waded into it, I kind of realized this is a very deep rabbit hole. And I had to very quickly make a decision. Do I go down the rabbit hole and prepare a 100-slide presentation that lasts for 2 hours? Or do I shorten it? Well, I decided to kind of shorten it. Is that Sophia, is that your dog?
Yeah, I'm gonna close the microphone. Sorry.
There you go. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and again, welcome everybody. And we will follow. At the very end, I've got 4 questions that I'm going to throw out to kind of stimulate some discussion afterwards. We'll just see how it comes out. So I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. Okay, today this presentation is going to be on the subject of metamodernism. It's a term that I think is oftentimes I've observed is blended. You talk about spiral dynamics integral, metamodernism. It's all kind of blended together oftentimes. And I guess as I dove into this specific issue of metamodernism, I realized that there are distinctive differences and a lot of nuance within this. So what we'll cover today is first of all, I'll give a quick definition of metamodernism, go into its origins and background. And then I'll kind of go into the playground or the landscape, if you will, of metamodern philosophy. If I'll briefly get into where to find it, if you want to dive specifically into metamodernism and not necessarily go down a spiral dynamics or an integral path. And then I'll briefly talk about kind of spiral dynamics integral and metamodernism. And in there, I'll kind of try to draw some clarification of the boundaries, if you will, and the distinctions and where spiral dynamics integral fits into metamodernism and how it fits in. And at the very end, I'll have the questions and we can get into some discussions of that, hopefully. So real briefly, and this is all a result of research that I did online. As I said, I'm not an expert on metamodernism. I don't have a huge background in it. I don't have the depth of knowledge in metamodern philosophy and that I do in spiral dynamics or in integral theory. So metamodernism is a term that refers to a range of developments observed in many areas of arts, philosophy, culture, and it reflects an emerging worldview. It emerged in the aftermath of postmodernism and corresponds to digitalized post-industrial global age. And it started roughly at the turn of the 21st century, very, very roughly. It can be characterized by many as mediations between aspects of modernism, postmodernism, and integration with pre-modern, or in other words, indigenous or traditional cultural codes. So it's a blending together of, in some ways, the four previous models. Now, the prefix meta refers to a reflective stance and repeated rumination, which denotes a movement between, or a meta, opposite poles, a meta of opposite poles, as well as beyond meta them. So it's a reflecting back on, moving through, and then going beyond. And sometimes is described as postmodernism. So as you can see, we start with, kind of a monotheistic pre-modern worldview, moved into the modern worldview, moved into the postmodern, where we're really discussing the difference between subject and object. And then we moved into the metamodernism, where we kind of, through a series of ruminations, if you will, moved to a new place. So this is just some ideas what a modern idea is. Faith in science, development and progress, democracy, the individual, meritocratic social order. Humanity can recreate nature by virtue of her reason. Really into humanism, pro-growth, and the various other aspects. And the modern philosophy really, from a spiral dynamics standpoint, really started with the emergence of the orange beam, if you will. The postmodern, critical questioning of all knowledge and science, suspicion towards all grand narratives and about progress, emphasis on symbols and contexts, ironic distance, a view that cultures have been oppressed and ruined by modern society, multicultural order where the weak are included, and a really strong narrative on humanity has destroyed the biosphere. Moving into the modern, metamodern ideas or worldviews or perspectives that have emerged in the 21st century, really looking at how can we reap the best parts of the other two? In other words, how do we find the upside? How do we find the beneficial or positive elements of the various worldviews, not just focusing on the specific one that we adhere to. Also, can we create a better process for personal development? So there's a kind of a blending of the left side of the spiral with the right side. Can we recreate the processes by which society is governed locally and globally? How can modern, postmodern, and pre-modern people live together productively? Those are some of the questions that are asked. How can politics be adjusted to an increasingly complex world? And what is the unique role of humanity in the ecosystem of nature? So these are some of the intellectual and subjective or subject matters that are dealt with reality, depending on whether you're looking at it through a modern lens, a postmodern lens, or a metamodern lens. The term was first used by a scholar, Masoud, I won't even try to pronounce it, around 1975, in his book, Theory as Resistance, to describe, and he was, in that book, he was describing a cluster of aesthetics which had been emerging in American literary narratives since the mid-1950s. So this was a very narrow focus looking at literary narratives and what they mean. So this kind of started around this was published in 1975. And then in 1999, Moyo Okidiji applied the term to contemporary African American art that issues an extension and challenge to modernism and postmodernism. So the term first introduced in 1975, just the term itself was picked up by the African American writer who applied it to analysis of American art issues. And then in 2010, two cultural theorists contributed significantly to the theorization of post-postmodernism. That's the term they use. They didn't pick up the term metamodernism. And according to them, the metamodern sensibility can be conceived as a kind of informed naivete, a pragmatic idealism characteristic of cultural response to recent global events such as climate change, the financial crisis, political instability, and digital revolution. Now that was quite a mouthful. And it was, as I was crafting this, that's kind of where it hit me that, man, this thing is way, way bigger than I thought it was. In a sense, the metamodernism writ large or as a whole does play itself out. And I'm going to talk about, I say here, the landscape of metamodernism. It really does play itself out in a number of areas. Certainly in the arts, in architecture, it plays itself out in politics, in economics, the media, and then of course in the whole area of human development theory, spiral dynamics, integral theory. So kind of the characteristics of metamodern art, and this was kind of a cut and paste thing here, and I'll just read it and don't ask me to explain what they mean. Hyper reflexivity, in other words, life is a movie, a narrative double frame, oscillation between opposites, and that's something that really gets at the whole meta issue. Metamodern art tends to be very quirky, focusing in on the tiny or the epic. Constructive pastiche, don't ask me what that means. There's an ironic element to it, over projection, and then I love this term, metacute. These are just some examples of metamodern sculpture, metamodernism being expressed in paintings. It's a book, The Overstory by Richard Powers, is considered to be a metamodern piece of literature. And then, of course, in film, the recent movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, is kind of characteristic of approaching the whole metamodern philosophy and capturing it in a film form. Metamodern architecture defines the structure of the feeling of the contemporary epoch, characterized by an appeal to all past cultures in order to find the sources of a new. In other words, it's that looking back, architecturally, what were the things that exist, were developed in the past? How do we draw things from them and use them as a source to create something new? The phenomenon of memory has become again relevant and in demand in architecture disciplines. The desire for constant innovation in modernism and postmodern irony were replaced by a serious attitude to any surviving fragment and a desire to materialize layers of different epochs. And so again, here's, this very interesting architectural design, these arches in these long hallways. In some ways, this is a meta-modern reinterpretation of some of the very old, for instance, some of the old cathedrals. You've got a repurposing of some existing structures. I think this was used to be if I remember right, this used to be a parking lot or a parking, not lot, parking garage that's been repurposed and turned into a park where people can gather. I'm not sure exactly what this represents from a repurposing or a representation of earlier architectural themes would represent. Metamodern politics looked for and engages. It basically says you need to look for and engage with people who stand for something instead of standing against everything. So it's a repurposing, if you will, or a redefinition of how do you get involved. In other words, endeavor to build future with others, not just destroy the past. So in a sense, this is kind of taking some of the positive elements of orange and contrasting that against some of the negative elements of green, and really then coming up with saying that, look, this is what you need to do to be politically involved. It basically says if you find yourself treating people as zero sum, if you're involved in a movement or something where people are treated as zero sum, metamodern politics says walk away. In other words, learn to embrace potential sources of aid. And in the battle between you and the world, bet on the world, then join a group. Learn from and support others as you support and learn from them. Metamodern economics in its various forms really is about two things, equity and sustainability. You got your older model here of the Mickey Mouse, as they call it, the Mickey Mouse economic model, where if you're focusing on economy, you basically say focus on economy and make that everything. And yeah, you might want to consider environment and society on the side, but make all your efforts, put all your resources into building and growing the economy, as opposed to what they call this bullseye or sustainability model over here, where you're saying, because we're talking about economics, you do need to keep economic issues at center because that's what you're working on, but they have to be done within the context of that economy exists within a society and it must support the health of that society, and that society exists within an environment, and that environment must be supported and dealt with in a healthy way such that the sustainability of society and the economy that is at the core of that is maintained. So you've got this blending of economic issues, social issues, and environmental issues. Metamodernism really, because it has it was, it began with the 21st century, or had its origins very not too long before the beginning of the 21st century, and then built momentum during the 21st century. It existed in parallel with the media, especially social media. So it's really hard to grasp or discuss metamodernism or issues that come out of metamodernism without considering the media, and especially the social media aspects of it. Let's say here, smartphones and social media become increasingly pervasive in a technology-dominated world. A new medium of discourse is arising. Internet memes evolve and become more self-referential and self-conscious, and new subcultures and genres of memes develop. Memes that address controversial and emotionally provocative subjects are becoming increasingly more popular, and a contradiction emerges from this. The medium of memes, one of humor, is at odds with its context. Analyzing memes through a lens of metamodernism helps us to understand how the medium operates instinctually, as memes oscillate between sincerity and irony. Additionally, a metamodern understanding of memes illuminates how memes can be used to manipulate groups of people, but also how memes can be used to facilitate community in a socially fragmented way. And how many times have we delved into the conversations about how social media and media in general, it seems to be creating more problems, and indeed in some ways what appear to be insolvable problems, but in society. And again, if you dive into the issue of metaphysics, or of metamodernism from a media standpoint, you kind of start to wrestle with these issues. And of course, because at the core of this is the idea of memes, that leads us directly, okay, let me hold on that. If you want to find metamodernism, here are some of the places that you can go online that will allow you to, in some way, shape, or form, learn about and engage with metamodern thinking, people who are oriented towards the metamodern philosophy. Metamoderna.org, the Emerge podcast, Modernism at Abstraction, and of course, Rebel Wisdom. Because at the core of the media element of metamodernism is the whole aspect of memes. That's really where it gets into, very much interfaces with spiral dynamics and the integral philosophy. And again, which is a proponent of, or posits that you have to look at things from a holonic standpoint. We have to deal with increasing complexity, and again, the spiral dynamics model, if you will, it's very helpful, and it defines, okay, these are the various memes, these various worldviews that have existed throughout humanity, and there are chunks of humanity that reside in each of these levels or these stages. And some of these stages are suited for certain life conditions or realities, and depending on how close to those actual life conditions and realities the V-meme resides, it can either be very functional or very dysfunctional. And I don't want to get into a lot of discussions about that right now, or I won't present that, but how many times have we talked about that reality over the last 2 years? I guess the biggest thing that takeaway for me was because I did not understand metamodernism very much when I dove into this. Most of my background came from an understanding of spiral dynamics and integral philosophy. I guess the biggest takeaway I had was that integral theory, and this is looked at from a meta-modern standpoint. A lot of people who are involved in the meta-modern world or within those circles kind of say that integral theory is much more spiritual and metaphysical view of the same phenomenon. Metamodernism believes that spiral dynamics is too simplistic and integral theory is too spiritual, and attempts a more and metamodernism attempts a more scientific, rigorous theory. But eventually they all refer to the same main subject. They're all talking about the same main subject, and that is adult development theory. So is spiral dynamics integral metamodern? Yes, it is. Is metamodernism just spiral dynamics integral? No, it's not. It's a much bigger and broader subject matter than spiral dynamics and integral by themselves. And kind of the insight that I came out of this was that it's often said that spiral dynamics is a map. It's not, but not the territory. How many times have we heard that? Well, a territory is filled. The reason that there's a distinction between a map and a territory is filled with very specific details, and a lot of very specific details that are not at all depicted on a map. And it seems to me that within this whole broiling thing we call human society, metamodernism, or the ideas that float around metamodernism, the problems that it tries to address, actually adds a lot of specific details that are assumed but not depicted within the SDI map. And I think that's the real value of coming to a better understanding of just what metamodernism is. A spiral or a picture of a spiral dynamic spiral doesn't specifically talk about, okay, what are the political aspects of it? If you're looking at it from a perspective of somebody that's of the green V meme, the model itself doesn't get into the politics of it. It doesn't get into the architecture. It doesn't get into the arts. It doesn't get into the economics necessarily. And it's those specifics that are, and it certainly doesn't get into the those elements in either orange or turquoise, but it is metamodernism. It is metamodernism thought and philosophy that does fill in those details that are not specifically addressed if you just focus in on the model itself. In other words, if you're just looking at what Ken Wilber talks about, and if you're just looking at what Graves and Beck talk about in their writings, they don't talk about architecture particularly. They don't talk about the arts necessarily, but metamodernism does explore that. So I just came up with four questions that I'd like to throw out and that we could discuss. And the first one is, let's just assume that the metamodernism as a whole does indeed consider spiral dynamics to be too simplistic. Why do you think that opinion is held? So that's kind of my first question. Not necessarily saying that they're absolutely right, but if they hold that opinion or that belief, it must be based in something. So what do you think that something is? And then out of that, how would you address that opinion if someone you respected raised that issue with you? I mean, we're all aficionados of spiral dynamics and integral. If someone that we respected intellectually and emotionally were to raise the issue of, well, spiral dynamics is just too simplistic, how would we address that issue with them? Question 3, how do you think the best of pre-modern, modern, and postmodern worldviews could be woven together to enable a more sustainable human society to emerge and flourish? And I suppose I've asked this question in 100 times in 100 different ways, but I'm asking it again. And another one, that this is maybe focusing in on a similar saying what I asked in question 3, but how do you believe a strong subjective spiritual orientation to life can be strongly melded into an equally strong subjective or objective scientific orientation? So I'm going to stop sharing, and we can, I suppose I should have asked these questions one at a time, but I guess I'll throw it out to the group. Choose whatever one you want to comment on, and let's let the discussion begin. Thank you. Safrir.
Before I answer your questions, it's hard for me to understand the insight or the conclusion you made 2 slides before about that spiral dynamic and metamodernism is that metamodernism including its spiral dynamic, because maybe I don't understand metamodernism enough and I didn't see it in your slides. Maybe you can explain how metamodernism solve problems, because spiral dynamic, yes, it's a map, but it's also solving problems, and so it's hard for me to compare without seeing any example of metamodernism solving problems or other field that spiral dynamic is dealing with.
Well, before I attempt to answer that, I'm going to throw it out. Does again, I'm no expert on metamodernism. I can't address that, at least at some level, but I'd like to throw it out to the group, to those of you who may know more about metamodernism than I do. Please try to respond to what Safrida asked.
Can I make a comment there, Paul? Is that okay? Thanks for a great presentation. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. So I think that the thing with the metamodern turn is, as Paul sort of tried to indicate, it's really broad. It's a really big umbrella, basically. So it's not a specific thing. The closest I can get to it is it's almost more like an attitude. And even within the whole big sort of swirl of metamodern stuff, there's kind of two, and you can slice it lots of different ways. There's kind of two camps, and there's a camp that sort of thinks it's something we're going to create, and a lot of those come from a kind of theory background, and they're trying to theorize what the metamodern is. And there's another camp which I'm probably feel more aligned with, which is this is happening anyway, and you're just trying to work out what the hell it is or what the hell is going on. And I think that's in some ways the more interesting thing, because part of the people in the camp who want to theorize see themselves as the next Foucault or Derrida or whatever, for the next evolution. There's a kind of some kind of academic careerism or something going on with that, which is okay, that's fine for them, but I don't think that's the most interesting part of it. The most interesting part is there's this broad sense that there's social change is happening, and that comes from a sense of delusion in the modern project, which in the broadest sense started between 300 to 500 years ago. So in its sense, we've kind of got to this pinnacle of modernity now in technological, scientific terms, whatever, but it's not people don't feel satisfied. You know, in some senses, we're richer materially. People in the West are richer, but at the same time, we're destroying the planet. We haven't resolved political issues, as is very evident. You know, people are still starving on the planet, and whether they know it or not, what a lot of the sort of metamodern people say is the problems are actually in the metaphysics of modernity. The actual fundamental underlying worldview makes all these problems almost inevitable, because it takes an extractive view towards nature. So it just sees nature as a commodity you extract value from. You know, has various other kind of built-in ways of seeing the world, which then almost inevitably lead to these problems. So then the question then becomes is what does the next, you know, if the world is changing and if this is emerging, what does the next metaphysics look like? How will people 50 or 100 years from now see the world? You know, and is there anything we can do to kind of help that on its way to be like the kind of you know, what they call midwives or whatever? You know, people help the birth so it's as least painful as possible. And some people would say that's an urgent question because they think we won't solve any of these crises like the climate change or the wars unless we undergo that shift. So anyway, that's not really answering your question, but that's maybe answering why that your question can't be answered.
So I want to address it because at least I don't know a lot about metamodernism, but just from thinking in the last 5 minutes, I see two differences which I see in spiral dynamic and I don't see in spiral in a metamodernism. One is that metamodernism is much more fixed point of view. It doesn't have the flexibility to move to all of them, even to so this is one change. The other thing is the problem solving, which I think spiral dynamic is different from metamodernism. Is you can understand that if you would look for metamodernism, you come from a perspective that you cannot really integrate all the things. And in spiral dynamic, since it's have an evolutionary value or characteristics, it can change all the time and adapt to anything that change. So I see that it's not exactly parallel, at least to my opinion.
You know, thank you for that clarification. And I guess I somewhat apologize for maybe making this presentation too brief. But metamodernism is not fixed. Metamodernism is not about non-integrating. Metamodernism is 110% about integration.
Yes, I understand it. Yeah. But in spiral dynamic, we can go to point of view which are before integration and use it to solve problem in the correct places. Not everywhere, not every solution for spiral dynamic is integration.
Right. Okay. So I guess to specifically answer your question, then we'll get to Bill. You're a filmmaker. So I'm going to throw a challenge out to you. You have to present, we live in a world where you've got 8 different worldviews that are in many ways are in total conflict, and that 6 of those 8 people, of 6 of the 8 of those worldviews are held by 98% of the population, and they don't understand integral at all. They don't understand that this is all about, everything's going on around you, it's all happening at the same time, and we don't know what the fuck's going on. So you need to make a movie about that, and you choose to use heavy spiral dynamics language in it, talk about green stuff and red stuff and blue stuff and all this. Do you think that's going to resonate with that 98% of the people on the planet? And I would posit that no, it won't. But the movie and I didn't, and and maybe speaking out of place here because I didn't actually see the movie, but that movie, everything everything happening everywhere at the same time, basically communicates and conveys that reality in a way that just focusing in on using spiral dynamics speak and spiral dynamics ways of thinking wouldn't communicate.
It's a great example because all the time I watch whenever I watch this film, I felt that I'm so frustrated that it's a go out of balance because it starts to be like a spiral dynamic, and then it change into crazy places that they are. Well, I believe that if I could take the script of anywhere and change it by the code of spiral dynamic without using spiral dynamic words or code, it could be a better film. But it's my opinion, completely. They are great. I can really see the great attitude for people, but I see differences. Maybe metamodernism is better, but I can see differences.
Well, and again, I'm not trying to imply that one is better or worse. I'm just, as I said in the one of the next to the last slide, metamodern, spiral dynamics, is spiral dynamics metamodern? Yes, of course it is. Of course it is. But is modern metamodernism only spiral dynamics? Of course it's not, because it includes.
I would say that. Sorry, I would say I wouldn't rephrase it like this. I would say that there are parallel lines between the two, but there are things in a spiral dynamic which I can't find in metamodernism, like evolution, like problem solving in not by metamodernism is all about problem solving by combining. In spiral dynamics, sometimes you combine, sometimes you're not. It's more about matching.
Okay, well,
I see it. Maybe it's hard for me to explain. Maybe I'm wrong.
That's okay. That's okay. But thank you for the question, and but I want to get on to Bill at this point.
Thanks, Paul. I thought that was a great presentation. Just a couple of comments. Wilbur talks about the map versus the territory, as you pointed out. The map does not include the whole territory. If you try to include the whole territory, then the map becomes so complicated that it can't solve anything. And so, I mean, one of my questions is, what does metamodernism do? Where does it fit in the map? The idea of integral theory is it's a map of everything. So if metamodernism is a thing, then it needs to fit into integral theory somewhere, right? And that's, and I think it probably does. And I think it seems to fit up there in the very high levels, in the very high tiers. But if integral theory doesn't integrate it, then it's not really integral. That there's something else more than integral. The second thing was with regard to Steve. I thought, when you say that it's either descriptive or it's predictive, and I've felt that spiral dynamics has been very descriptive for all of us. We try to analyze what's going on, and it helps us make sense of the world with the different values of what the hell's going on. Excuse me. And we like to presume that it will help us make better decisions, but it doesn't always do it. It doesn't seem to be as predictive as we would like it to be. And the evidence for that, I gave you two things. One, Trump. I mean, nobody predicted Trump. I mean, nobody. And yet it happened. And now in retrospect, we keep trying to figure out how the hell it happened, but nobody predicted it. Nobody. And nobody predicted this recent invasion of Israel. I mean, everybody was caught with their pants down. And we can sit there and say, well, Hamas, you know, sort of purple and red and not very good people. And but the people that I see interviewed in Gaza seem to be more evolved than that. They seem to be at higher levels. And so why is the government so red and purple? Up until this, Israel, we consider it to be a much more evolved society. And yet it has been regressing with its Supreme Court and others. So it's going back to red and not seeing its thing. And then we have people like Nikki Haley and others on the debate stage saying that we need to eliminate Hamas. Well, that's like saying we're going to eliminate hatred or evil. Well, I mean, again, it's a very simplistic understanding. So it seems like all of these countries, even with very good people in them, are allowing very regressed people to be their leaders. I think spiral dynamics and integral help us understand that more, but I have no idea what to do with it. And the last comment I'd say is that one of your early pictures there on the slide about oscillating, and you were oscillating between what, nihilism and
Objective and subjective. Well,
no, that's postmodern. I mean, that's postmodern.
let me
The
pull it up.
metamodern, the metamodern was oscillating between
Naivety and cynicism, I think, wasn't it?
right, naivety and cynicism.
Hold on.
And yeah, I think you're right about that. and naivete and cynicism.
Yeah.
And I just thought about that with the current conflict in Israel and how, you know, both sides are just doing stupid things. And there's a lot of naivete. I mean, what did Hamas think was going to happen when they did this? What the hell does Israel think that's going to happen when we see them bombing hospitals and stuff? I mean, it's nuts. And we're oscillating between naivete and cynicism. Again, as a descriptive, like Todd said, I mean, Steve, it's descriptive, but what the hell do you do about it?
Well, Bill, I think you're getting at the central frustration that I've expressed for a long time, and that is, and you know, this is my criticism, if you will, of spiral dynamics and integral, is that it's great at it gives incredibly deep insight for analysis purposes. It's incredibly insightful in terms of being able to define what a problem is, and it's got massive amounts of tools for that. It's got no tools for how to solve it. There's just none. And I hesitate to use the word criticism because that's not what the books were written about. They were books to give some insight into the complexity, this new complexity that we're living in, that heretofore the writing of that before Graves wrote the book, that reality, that mindset, that wasn't really defined. And that's a very powerful tool, but where we're at historically now is, okay, now what? What are we going to do about it? You know?
Sure. Well, I mean, that's how science works. I mean, ecology first starts as, well, gee, it seems like there's organization out here. So you just start describing all the different plants and what's there, and then you start to see patterns, right? And you just keep going. But in the end, what do? When you after you've described the ecology and you see their forest fires, you think, oh, well, we shouldn't have any forest fires. Turns out we were wrong about that. We didn't know enough about it, right? So it's normal to have to start with describing,
Right.
and then beginning to to understand and see patterns.
Yeah.
But in the grand scheme of things, I'm not saying that the spiral and integral and metamodernism can't give us some answers as to what the hell's going on and where we need to go. But first you have to go through these basic stages that we're going through. I thought you had a great presentation. I mean, it really was very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I guess my response to that specific, what you said was that, again, how I presented it was metamodernism emerged with the 21st century. What year is it? It's 2023. 20 years. Come on. I mean, I think what I anticipate is, again, because spiral dynamics and integral is metamodernism, is metamodernism, modern, but metamodernism is much, much bigger than that. It's, it's like, Bill, you're a mammal, but you're also a human being. Is a squirrel a mammal? Of course it is. Is a squirrel a human being? Of course it's not. When you get down to the specificity of things, and my belief and hope is that out of this whole metamodern concoction, if you will emerge over time specific tools that will allow us to deal with the challenges, just as the orange V meme that emerged out of the Black Plague solved a lot of the problems that the Black Plague created. But I guarantee you, it didn't happen 20 years after the Black Plague was done. Anyway, Bet, go ahead. Thanks for your comments, Bill.
So the map is not the territory. And I would like to just ponder these questions we're asking. So I was just looking at my GPS, my map on my Apple phone, and I was thinking about how these things that we like, that why we're here, because we like these things. Like, what are they used for? I wouldn't say it's a map, but it doesn't tell us where we're going. We have these ideas about what turquoise and maybe we know something about yellow, but these other colors that are ahead, we don't really know what they look like. And so the question is, where are we going? So Paul, and maybe Bill, maybe you both said this, it's not predictive. It's not predictive. So if you were looking at a map, you can say, oh, I want to go to this specific place. And then the map can help you pick the route. So I would say these things are basically a way of looking at history. Like, it's a way to make sense of history. It doesn't show us where we're going. We can all sit around and project where we want to go. And maybe metamodernism, I think it's history. It's a way to look at history and make sense of it. And also every day, new history is happening. And they were like, oh yeah, this morning this happened. And it fits into this puzzle. But none of this is predictive. And so if we want to think about predictive things, and then you think about like models, predictive models. But the truth is, how do predictive models work? They work on history. All of this stuff is based on history. And we always continually make this mistake of looking at history and saying like, oh, well, it worked like this before. And you look at the 2008 financial crisis. I actually did so much research. I put together a 7-minute presentation on that, that we're continually shocked when our models break. Like we're just, I mean, it's like we should be just not looking at models anymore. And because they don't work. And the thing, we just want to believe that they work because we are addicted to certainty. We want to know how things are going to happen. So I would say we just need to every day start off with like, what's happening right now and how can I act in this moment? Because that's really the only thing we can do. And it's interesting because we're all sitting around like, oh, we didn't see this and that. But, you know, Trump woke up one morning and said, you know what? I'm going to run for president. And Hamas woke up one morning and said, like, you know what? Let's plan an invasion, right? These are people, these are actors who are doing things in the world. Something's informing them and making them say, I'm going to do something. And so I think it's like each of us is waking up and saying we're going to do something. And that's up to us to hopefully make better things happen and good things. Anyways, that's not what I think about all this.
Thanks, Bet. That's a very, thank you for that very optimistic view on things. We need more of that. I find it really, I find it really hard to get too deep into spiral dynamics because you're right, at its core, it's just not, it's just a reflection of history. It's an interpretation of how history unfolded. It gives a massive amount of new insight, but it doesn't solve the problems. And I get frustrated by that. I do want, and it's not that that I personally want to be able to predict what's going to happen, but I would like to have tools that I can use to at least shape how it might happen.
You know what, Paul? I used to be a huge news addict, like huge. Like I would read The Economist every day, listen to NPR, read the Wall Street Journal. I tried to be like a good wide range of different topics. And then I quit the news in 2012 maybe. And I quit the news for many years. And then one morning I woke up and I heard something. I don't even know who told me, but I heard about Brexit. Someone told me that Brexit had happened that day. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is completely insane. So I went and listened to the analysis of The Economist. By the way, they're located in London. These are the smartest people in the world sitting in London. And I listened to their analysis and they're all like, we didn't see this coming. Oh my gosh, we're so shocked. And I'm like, everyone's a stupid idiot. No one knows anything. And that's when I decided that no one knows anything. Because if the people who are the smartest people sitting there in London can't see this coming, no one knows anything. Okay, I yield my time.
Well, and you're right. I mean, that is the horrible fallacy of humanity is that nobody knows what the future is. And we're very uncomfortable with that. Barbara.
You know, somebody mentioned, you know, the reactions to this, like you just said, why didn't
I think she's cutting out again.
Barbara, we can't hear you.
She was cutting
why do
out.
we allow?
Barbara, you're cutting out a lot. Barbara,
And go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say keep your hand up, but go ahead then. It sounds like you're back.
Yeah, I've been having a terrible time. I mean, I've gone through 3 different types of connections and it's just not.
Yeah, now you're cut out again. Is there a way you could make a brief comment through the chat?
You know, Barbara, you could also dial in on like your cell phone, dialing in instead of using your connection for voice.
It won't let me dial in. It keeps rejecting it. I guess I can go try that one more time.
Does anybody else want to jump in while Barbara's trying to fix her connection problem?
I'd just like to ask a question to the group in terms of like the basic premise of metamodernism is that we're undergoing an epochal shift, basically, that we're coming to the end of modernity. And I wonder if that idea resonates with people or not. Is that, you know, are we still chugging along as we have been for the last 400 or 500 years? Or is there something fundamental that people can sense is shifting or changing?
Well, I guess my answer to that is yes and yes. I mean, are we going through a fundamentally chaotic and previously unexperienced reality? Yes, we are. Are we just chugging along the way we have for the last 2,000 years? Yes, we are. Therein lies the problem.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're always going to be on the spiral, right? We're always going to have beige and red and purple. And it may be one of the reasons that we don't predict Brexit or Trump or Hamas as accurately as we do. I mean, there's always going to be some person who predicted something, and then in the end they can say, I was the one that got it right. But maybe it's because we're too optimistic, or even though we think that we understand that evolution is up, down, down, but we never want to see the downs. We in the future we think that maybe we can minimize the downs, and maybe we can. You know, I mean, if I think back to some of my economic interests, I had to give some talks about things and how, you know, somewhere around the turn of the century, things like booms and busts were just felt to be natural things that happened, and there was no human intervention that could come along. And then you had people like Keynes come along and say, no, I mean, there are these booms and busts, and if you borrow money during the busts, then you can minimize the damage of those busts. And he's right. So maybe we can, instead of having huge swings, maybe if we understand that it'll minimize them. But I don't think anybody naturally wants to see the down. You know, I think we just want to feel like evolution is helping all stages rise. And clearly we see right now that they're not rising, that we're, you know, it's not just Hamas, you know, it's not just Ukraine. It seems to be here, and populism. So anyway, it's fascinating. I love talking to you guys. It's very interesting.
Zafrir, thanks, Bill.
Yes, what Bill just said, I think this is the most important thing. Yes, we cannot predict exactly the future, but we definitely can minimize. And I think that we are sitting here and speaking about spiral dynamic, like what we are know now and what Don did in South Africa. This is all of it. I see so many options, so many other technique and method that can cooperate in politics and society along with spiral dynamics that can minimize and the amount of those things that no one do or almost no one do is huge. And for me, it's very clear that we should be open to evolve and trying to use spiral dynamic and other technique, and without a doubt we can minimize. And right now there are places in the world that minimize conflict without knowing a spiral dynamic, and it's happening some places with great success, and you can learn so much from it. And for me, it's really emotional, you know, that we are not doing it, and I'm keep sometimes reacting here in a kind of aggressive reaction. Why we are not doing? Because I'm getting crazy that we are not doing it, but it's especially because I see potentials, and I really hope we will open our mind and we can do some predictions and do some actions.
Just to put a metamodern spin on what you said there. So if we think in the grand sweep of history, if you lived in ancient Egypt, you basically had the same social system and religion for 3,000 years. It would have been very hard in that society to imagine it could be any other how whatsoever. That would have just seemed like that's exactly what the human condition was if you lived in that country, you know, and it was for 3,000 years. You know, that's a very long time. And no, but I'm saying, and as you go forward, then the epochs actually get a bit shorter each time, right? So you then have the Roman Empire that lasts whatever, how many hundreds or you know, approximately 1,000, whatever, and then.
Sorry.
No, but your statement actually is a kind of metamodern statement, because we're at a place now where we've seen so much change in such a short span of time that yellow kind of perspective is possible. Do you see what I mean? You see that there are no permanent fixed truths, and we had things happening in the 20th century which have changed human experience forever. So all human history prior to the moon landing, the idea of landing on the moon was almost like the definition of impossibility. And now it's possible. So certain kind of, you know, really kind of categorical changes have happened in aspects of human existence. I'm not saying our emotional makeup has changed or some other characteristics have changed, but some of the kind of factual things in how we relate to the world have kind of changed. And so maybe that's a cause for the optimism that you feel, because everyone surely now could be convinced that things can be other. And I think the difference that differentiates maybe a kind of metamodern perspective from a modern perspective is, for modernism, it was just like, no, a kind of scientific worldview is the correct worldview. Let's just steamroller over all other cultures with this kind of scientific secularism and just get them all to adopt that in democracy, and the world will be a happy place. That hasn't worked. And I think the metamodern saying, okay, well, given that hasn't worked, and we've also fucked up the planet at the same time, what do we do next? And a lot of people are saying things like, well, we have to accommodate a much bigger spectrum of views. We have to accommodate people who have a tribal view of the world, or people who have a kind of a, you know, so somehow, and it's the same message as second tier in spiral dynamics, but how do we have this polyphony that can coexist, basically? And that effectively is the metamodern challenge that we face.
I don't know enough about real metamodern intervention in politics and society. I don't know. Maybe there are. You know, in my mind, and I'm not the only one, when I learned spiral dynamics 20 years ago for the first time, I was sure that in 10 years, we will be in a different world. So we are 20 years after, and we are just going back. So it's for me, in my mind, with the same resources, with the same capacity that the people have in the world today, we can minimize more than half of our problem just by giving money to the right people to do the leadership. We can take the same money, the same people, the same country, the same hate, the same wars, and instead of giving the money for this NGO and this Bill Gates, I don't know the name of the charity. With this money, we can now change things that in 5-10 years, the world will look different. And we are not doing it just because we are not doing fast enough the information spreading around the world. I can, in my mind, the world is already in peace. In my mind, for me, it's very clear. I cannot do it alone, but if there were a few thousand of people like in this room, that they were in charge of solving the world of the problem, and I think we could do amazing, amazing stuff.
Well, I think you're right, Sofia. But again, as spiral dynamics implies, and as it does directly address, information doesn't solve anything. I mean, you can take you can take a flat earther and present them with mountains, a world full of information that says the Earth is a sphere, and they're not going to believe you. I mean, that's the challenge.
100 examples how information changed the world. 100, very easily. But it's a question of the combination of many factors. Information is one of them. It's not the only one. It's not enough.
Yeah.
If you would look to 2,500 years ago about Socrates' group, that they were that they developed the orange value of reasons and conclusion, and it took 2,000 years until the revolution of industrial revolution. It took 2,000 years. We could save those 2,000 years and save all the middle age war, but it took too time. It's only information that came from Socrates' philosophy, and it didn't speed enough. It didn't reach the other important people fast enough.
But it's not about important people. It's about people with wealth and power. And there is absolutely no incentive if you're Bill Gates to do anything constructive. You're right. He's putting money where it's useless. So our political systems and our financial systems are so broken that if we were really to fix this, then people would no longer be powerful, and they would no longer be running the world. And I don't mean Hamas, I mean Silicon Valley, and I mean the U.S. Senate and the DNC and the RNC. You can't fix it, Safir, because that would mean people lose their money and power. No, I mean, none of us can fix it.
I believe that 1,000 strong people with connection and money
Yeah, with connection and money, right?
Silicon Valley.
And none of us have connections. None of us have money, because the people that have the connections and money know which side their bread is buttered on, and it's not in fixing the system.
This is a fixed opinion. I don't know. Maybe we have someone's money. He just doesn't have the people that dream with him and make him invest his money. I don't know.
I think it's important to point out when things are working. And Barbara, we can hear you now.
Yeah.
Temporarily only.
I'm optimistic. I mean, in my mind, it's already happened. I hope one day you will join my dream, and because I can definitely, I'm not the one who can do it. I can dream. That's all.
Well, I've gone totally over to the cynical side, I'll have to admit. No more naivete. And maybe I've just spent too much time in corporations, because they're certainly the cesspools of the world, and Silicon Valley much worse than the old brick and mortar folks. So there's no incentive for these people to change. And they have come up with this scam of basically moving resources from the population to the elites in all of the West. And we're now looking like a third world country in terms of our economic capacities. You know, the 1% has grabbed everything, even in the West. And so it's
yes,
hard to see.
Barbara, you have many explanations. I hope you can find some place to dream.
You know, I thought local, and then what I discovered here locally, trying to fight something that the state is doing in the name of corporations, some really vicious stuff. The local folks tell me that sure, they could actually stop it. And what they've been told by the state is they'll never get another penny from state funds for roads. Their schools will no longer get state funding. You know, I mean, that's what's happening. These people are blackmailing the folks that try to stand up. And, you know, these are not poor people. They're not wealthy people, but they're not the poor folks in our area that are seeing this. You know, they have assets, but they simply don't have the power to go up against these incredibly wealthy, powerful behemoths. I mean, you look at U.S. Elections, right? And I know we've had a couple that have had hundreds of millions of dollars funded from outside the state.
Barbara, can you see? We need to stop to let other people. I know all you say, you are completely 100% right. Can you dream in your mind, not in real life? Dream in your mind the process that will work. That's it. You don't need to tell about it, to say about it. Just think about it.
No, I can't. That's where I'm at, Safir. I absolutely can see no light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, okay.
And that's a bad place to be in.
But Safir, don't worry, because between Barbara and I, you're like in the middle and I'm on the other side of like extreme positive, absolute, like everything's going to be great. So between the two of us, we balance out. I don't know if Paul stepped away, but I'm going to go next. Okay. So I'm going to now do the case for everything is going to be, actually, everything is completely uncertain. That's what I'm going to say, is that this is why I'm involved in this other integral group. It's called Integral Leadership in Action. And Don was on here a little bit ago, but he dropped off. So our group is all about action. Okay, action. This group is all about discussion. And the other one is all about action. And I think this is where the magic is. And I think, Safir, you said it and maybe Bill. I don't remember. So people have been, maybe it was Steve. Anyway, probably everyone said it at some point. But action, and I think in yellow, it's all about experimenting. Like it's just experiment, and some of them are not going to work. Actually, 999% of them won't work, and then 1% will work. And Barbara's pointing out some examples of things that she tried and didn't work. And it's like, choose your battles. I remember when I was at Verizon, I saw all kinds of things that were wrong. And I was like, oh, we got to fix this. We got to fix that. And someone's like, that you have to choose your battles. And I'm like, oh, I never thought about that. So I think, and being in yellow, we got to see the problems, which there's so many. And then we have to just choose the battles of where we're going to focus and who's our partners and what are the things that are working and what are not working. And then just like fix the things we can, And that way, at least every day, we're not feeling so sad and so depressed, because that's like, you can't do that. I think there's a few things that are happening in our world, and some of them are death cults. So the death cult is like the defeatist nihilist that, it's all for naught. And I think it's just too easy to fall into it. And there's just so many ways to fall into it. And it's like every day you have to choose to not be part of the death cult, and that we're going to fight and try to make life happen. So, and so I just want to put a few things out there. The fact that we're all here, Steve in England, Tasvir in Israel, who's being attacked, in the middle of a war, Veronica over in Spain trying to use AI to like connect to aliens or something. I don't know, Veronica. Anyways, Veronica's like on the edge, guys. She's like connecting to the next level. I just think that the proof that we have the possibility of doing anything is right here. Like, we can connect to each other. And if you look at the history, and you guys remember my presentation from a few weeks ago, if you think about the history and the trajectory, when things change happens is when two people are sharing information and trying things. And now we have the infinite possibility of connecting with everyone in the globe. Everyone who's trying something can say, look, I tried this thing, it didn't work, but this is what I learned. And so all of us connecting and trying things, that's how the change happens. So I'm infinitely positive that things can happen, but I'm also knowing that there's a bunch of people who are in a death cult, or people who just hate other humans, like for whatever reason, they don't like them. And they're like, I don't like those humans, I'm going to kill those humans. And so they're working together, right? The technology doesn't pick sides. It can be used by all of us. And so if there's a bunch of people who have bad values and want to kill people, they're going to use the technology to plan attacks and do terrible things. And then there's those of us who have good values and want life to happen, and we have to work hard. And I do think it's a battle. And so this is my pep talk, guys. We got to get it together, get ourselves out and go. All right, I'm Paul, back to you.
Thank you very much, Bet. Veronica, Marjorie, some of us have been dominating the conversation here, so. That's if Freer left. Oh,
I just don't want to show you this.
Veronica doesn't have anything to say, but I'm going to say something for her. She's making the most beautiful art. I was just looking at her Instagram. Like, she's so creative. And we're all supposed to make some art today because it's 11/11 for whatever reason. I just think, Veronica is doing it. She's making art. She's fighting the fight. She's using the tools. And she took this AI stuff and is like leveraging it to see her visions. And I just think she's a role model for all of us. And I am inspired. And thank you for all your beautiful art, Veronica. You're saying more through your art than any of us right now.
Sophia, you said you wanted to share something. I've allowed sharing.
What? Sorry?
Did you say you wanted to share something on the screen?
No.
Oh,
I
okay.
No,
don't want,
Veronica did.
I stopped my camera because I didn't want to share smoking.
Oh,
Don't smoke, by the way. It's not healthy for you.
Yeah.
But if we have time, I just, and no one else want to talk, I just say that I offer to the guys that organize this group, Beth, Paul, and the others, to share some information which not a lot of people in Earth heard about, how to use spiral dynamic to assist world peace. And this is something that not a lot of people are aware of. And whenever they let me do it, maybe I can raise some optimism. I think it will be helpful.
you know, Sophia, I did read the post that you sent to Veronica, and I was gonna respond back afterwards, but you know, as long as we don't have too big a group here, I wanted to give okay. First of all, I think yeah, you should go ahead and put something together and present it. You're gonna go get it into the schedule. I think it would be very interesting. But I did have a couple of cautionary things to say, and this came out of reading the dialogue, reading what you said. First one has to do with, and it all has to do with how you communicate, how you present what you do. This is a very scientifically oriented group.
Sure.
And
this is why I asked. I'm
yeah,
very
and
aware.
yeah,
I'm putting here and I put there. This is not my knowledge. It's someone else's knowledge. And the source of it is not scientific, but the content is very scientific. So if you hear only the content and not the source, you can make up your mind
yeah,
by your own. And I completely agree that we should, even me, we should have some kind of criticizing when we are listening to that.
yeah. And
So
that's, again, that's why even if you prefaced your presentation in that way, that would help a lot.
I will.
The other thing that I would strongly avoid is because you're going to stay away from this. This is higher information. This is coming from a higher source. Not everybody's going to be able to understand it. That just, again, this is my reaction. That's incredibly elitist. Incredibly elitist.
And possibly true.
And possibly true, but it's very elitist. And this group, I guess the final thing is prepare it with caution and don't be surprised with pushback that you get.
Yeah. I'm completely aware of it. You know, I didn't reveal it for many years.
Yeah.
But I did tried it on other group without saying the source of it.
Yeah.
And there are some things that didn't work and some things that work.
Yeah.
So so the source is really not important.
Well, it's one thing to
Paul,
say.
do
Another
we
thing.
want to stop recording, Paul?
What's that?
Yes.
Do you want to stop recording so that we don't have so much editing to do?
Can I make one last comment though, following on from yours, Bet, before we do, just because I think the point you made about Veronica's artwork and things, I think is actually quite an important one, because I think one thing that people can do is create new images, new memes, effectively picking up on Paul's point in his presentation, which is, and memes sounds too trivial because they can be fantastic artworks, but I think everyone in their mind, when they try to imagine the life they want for themselves or the future life, has an image. Basically, we think in terms of images, and you can only really move to a space or to a position that you can kind of hold as an image. And so if you create images that aim to reconnect what's now a very fragmented world, you're actually kind of creating portals which can enable people who were previously separated to start communicating. So I think this kind of role of image creator could actually be very, very transformational. But anyway, that's what I wanted to just add on to your point you made, Bet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think having an image of people working hard on trying things and experimenting, connecting with other people who are working hard and connecting, trying something. The thing is, if we don't try things, we don't know if it works.
Well, no, that's
So
not true. There are things that will never work. If I drop something, it's going to fall down. It's not going to fly off to the moon. So I think sometimes we need to remember that there are a whole lot of catastrophic failure solutions, and we need to be very careful. Hamas is a perfect example of a catastrophic failure solution to a long-term predicament, right?
So I think then we learn things like when we're babies, we learn if we touch something hot, it hurts. So the collective knowledge now of all the different experiments that have been made has to be shared openly and honestly.
We don't need to try that one again.
We don't need to try a lot of things again. Like
I love you saying that, but when I ran a team, we used to have a whiteboard, and on it was things, experiments we know we don't need to repeat again. And so we would, we'd have to do something, and it was okay, and then somebody would pop up and just write it down, and you learned from it and you went on, right? So there, and the problem is we don't learn as a species. We don't learn very well from that. I mean, Hamas is a perfect example of total lack of learning from history, right? Or maybe that's exactly what they wanted. I mean, if you truly want jihad, then and you want to set off Armageddon, it certainly wasn't a bad way to start. So
that's what I'm saying about death cults, Barbara. There are people who don't have some. They don't actually. They're not interested in making the most people happy on the planet, most creatures happy. They're just like, I don't care if all those people die.
Right. But and I think, if we look at business and politics in the West, we have an awful lot of death cult folks running around. Everybody from Donald Trump and his followers, to some of the far left cancel culture folks, just they definitely don't want a better world, right? They want their own way, regardless of the collateral damage.
Yeah, it's the othering. Like, oh, those people or those creatures, like, I mean, thinking about like animals in the ocean and, like, oh, those ones don't count. So, we just wipe them out. It doesn't matter. And, it's very limited because
there's a difference, Bet, between, Steve, you mentioned this earlier about looking at the ecosystem as something to exploit, right? And so, yes, I do worry in that mode. I do worry about wiping out all of the fish, because then how am I going to fish? Right. I mean, so I've got an economic and a selfish problem for that. Right. But I could care less about dead fish versus the human issue of those people are evil and they need to be annihilated. The Hamas sort of viewpoint that I now see kind of creeping up on in some Israelis, and that's really sad. You know, I've heard more and more as time goes on. You know, the original one was from the Israeli government folks was we have to defend ourselves, right? And now I'm hearing more and more from people who are at least semi-official talking about retribution and that, and it's like, oh God, guys,
Well,
don't even go
talking
there.
about eliminating Hamas or eliminating Palestinians? I think you're confusing.
No. No, what I've seen on some of the news, Saphir, more recently, is not about maybe not at all a good differentiation between Hamas and Palestinians, because there's a view that Palestinians got what they deserved by supporting Hamas, right? Which is sort of sad and untrue. But no, I've actually heard language change from self-defense to vengeance and retribution, and I've seen that subtle shift, and that's exactly what you would expect.
I don't understand.
So I think, are you saying it's okay to have retribution against Hamas but not against some Palestinian baby? Is that what you're basically differentiating?
Guys, what you hear in the news is so fucking you don't understand how kind of lies you hear, okay? And I can explain it from the beginning, but it will take time. Eliminating the Hamas in aggressive ways right now is a best holistic way. It's a spiral dynamic point of view, is at this time, at history, because it haven't done before, eliminating Hamas will save so many people.
Saphir, you're totally misunderstanding me.
They can be alive, but as an organization, this is something that if you wanted to keep existing in the world with these values, then you are not inspired. It's not offensive. This is, of course.
No, Saphir, you totally misunderstood me. I mean, okay. If I could right now wave a magic wand and totally eliminate Hamas, including every one of them dropping dead, I would be perfectly happy to do that. That's self-defense, and you know. I
think it's self-defense, but it's also very systematic thinking.
Yeah, well, it's practical, right? You know,
it's systematic thinking,
and it's systemic thinking, right? And it can't be done. But that's not what I was saying at all. I totally agree that
what are you saying?
So, but when I see U.S. news coverage, interviews with people in at least semi-official positions, Army folks, you know, low-level government officials in Israel. At the beginning, all of the language was careful. We have to eliminate Hamas. We have to defend ourselves. We have to, you know, this has become an untenable situation.
Okay,
and it was really well done.
To eliminate Hamas. I don't understand what is your
guys?
No, language.
Barb, hold on just a second.
We went to eliminate Hamas, but we don't want to hurt.
Barbara, I'm gonna stop the recording here.
I thought we stopped the recording.
Yes, I don't understand what is your criticize. They are saying truth. They are saying that in order to defend.
No, you missed my point.